99 out of every 100 subunits of the DNA are the same. Now, it would be interesting to ask Dr. Hovind which one was made in the image of the other, because that amount of similarity is pretty suspicious if they were created independently. If two of my students brought term papers in, and I looked through them and I found that of 1,000 words, 990 were the same, I would begin to suspect a little bit of plagiarism. But in evolution, it makes sense that more similarly related organisms will have more similar DNA, and that's exactly what we find. And it's consistent across all the parts of the DNA. Now, I don't know what he was saying about cytochrome C of sunflowers and humans. That sounds like it's at odds with everything I've read. The octopus eye is not at all similar to the human eye. It has the retina and the nerves the opposite way around from what human eyes have. And so the octopus and human eyes are not evidence for a common designer by any means.
Thank you. I will start again with you, Dr. Paulson. How do you explain the relationship of apes and humans to the Neanderthals? Isn't it true that living things evolve to meet their ecosystem? Organisms can evolve from rocks, but live by constant chemical reactions. Sure. How do you explain the relationship of apes and humans to the Neanderthals? Isn't it true that living things evolve to meet their ecosystem? Organisms can't evolve from rocks, but live by constant chemical reactions.
Well, there's 3 questions there. Do I get 6 minutes?
Go ahead.
I'll just take 2, because the second 2 don't make much sense. Let's see. The first one, apes and humans and Neanderthals. Neanderthals, as far as I'm aware, are an ancient form of human being, probably still Homo sapiens, that is really very similar to modern man. Mitochondrial DNA from Neanderthals has been studied, taken from the bones of Neanderthals, and there's about 4 times, I think it's like 4 or 5 times as much difference between the Neanderthals and modern humans as between different groups of modern humans. So the idea is that they were a group that diverged from the main line that led to modern humans some hundreds of thousands of years ago. The other thing about evolving from a rock, well, if life evolved from non-living matter, then obviously some inorganic substances became part of organic living cells. But let's see, I don't quite see what that has to do. What was the second part of that? The rock and the constant chemical reactions or something? I think I'll just leave that one.
I confess I don't understand the question either. I do understand a good part of it. As far as humans and Neanderthals, I think the evidence indicates, even though Neanderthals are presented as part of the evolutionary change in the typical textbook, the evidence from the Neanderthals is that they are just human. They're within the range of humans. The 4% difference that he mentioned is certainly still within the range of humans. Dr. Cuazzo has written a fascinating book on this called Buried Alive. He was one of the few men to actually go study the actual bones. Most people, when they study fossils and learn about evolution, they get to study a copy of the fossil, a casting or a replica. You ought to read this book, Buried Alive. You can get it to my ministry or get it to him. He lives in New Jersey. I'll get you his phone number if you want. Call him, ask him any questions directly. He's a dentist. He studied Neanderthals very thoroughly and wrote this very conclusive book about it. Said, folks, they're just a human, that most of them had acromegaly, excessive secretion of growth hormone in old age. The bones in the forehead start to get thicker. When a person passes 80 or 90 years of age, the forehead starts to thicken, get thick-headed. And he's thinking these people are probably over 100, and they develop slower. He found much evidence of slower, delayed maturation. Today, people mature and are able to produce children when they're 12 and 13. These are probably more like 16 or 18 or 20, delayed maturation. And it's just a fascinating book answering about the Neanderthals. As far as humans or anything coming from a rock, that's my whole point. It didn't happen. But ultimately, if you boil away the big words, the evolutionist has to believe we came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. I mean, there's no way out of the argument. That's what they believe. They keep trying to hide and say, well, we're only talking about living organisms evolving. Well, then get the rest of the stuff out of the books. Join me. Help me get that stuff out of there. That'd be a good cause.
All right, thank you. We have 10 minutes remaining in our question and answer session, and we'd like to take the opportunity for each doctor to present a question to the other and then allow them 2 minutes to respond to that. So we'll start with Dr. Paulson if you'd like to ask Dr. Hovind the question.
You can get him in, get
or we
prepared.
can start with the other, either or. Do you have a question?
Oh, I've got lots of questions, sure.
We'll start with you.
I still would like to know, you mentioned that there's libraries full of evidence for evolution. Would you please simplify it down? What is the best evidence you know of? You said you studied this for 28 years. What is the best evidence you know of any kind of animal producing a different kind? You mentioned about the gull, the white and the black gull. If that is not your best evidence, please tell me what is. Don't just say there's lots of evidence. Just please tell me your best one.
Will you tell me first what a kind is?
I did. You said I didn't give the definition of kind, and I did. I said animals that originally were able to reproduce living, viable offspring. And they may have diversified now, where for some reason they're no longer able to reproduce. Great Dane and a Chihuahua. Well, technically they can have a few mechanical problems, but the biblical created kinds were those that were capable of reproducing a viable offspring, which was also capable of reproducing. So that would be a good definition of kind. It's the best I come up with for the moment.
This is a quite an amazing thing, because these people who call themselves creation scientists have this idea of a kind, and they have no idea what it means. You just can't pin them down. I gave you a good definition for what a species is. It's a group of creatures that can interbreed, a group of animals or plants that can productively interbreed, and that's the definition of a species. That's a well-defined concept. There are some difficulties when you have transitions taking place, like the two gulls. But let me give my best evidence for this idea. Dr. Hovind's been talking about what? Dogs and bananas? Well, let's talk about dogs and peas, because I don't happen to have any knowledge of data on bananas, but I think if you can show it for peas, you can show it for bananas. And by the way, I haven't studied evolution for 28 years. I've studied biochemistry. But one of the things I have studied for almost 28 years is proteins that are in chromosomes called histones. And there's one of those called histone H3. There's 5 of them, 5 main classes altogether. But there's one called histone H3 that is very conserved in evolution. The explanation for this is that it has so many functions, so many parts of the protein. When the protein first originated, probably in the first nucleated cell, when that first happened, it had so many functions that no part of it could change. And so it has stayed the same. There's only one difference between mammals and peas. Now, you could say that's due to the same designer. I say it's due to common ancestry way back in the very first nucleated cell, the eukaryotic cell. How can we test which of those is true? Well, the DNA that encodes that protein can change. because the genetic code that goes from the DNA to a